Hello, welcome to Take 5, a 5-minute inspirational devotion from Evangelical Alliance Ireland. And my name is Paul Ritchie, and I'm looking at depression. And today I've got the big question that I want to ask, and that is it unspiritual to be depressed? You know the story. It happened in our church that I used to work in a while back. A man gets up, looks down at the congregation, and he says, "My friends, if you had the joy of the Lord, you wouldn't need to take tablets for your depression." That's not true. I actually rang that man and told him never to say that again. Is depression and anxiety unspiritual? Well, I'm going to tell you a few reasons why I think it's not necessarily unspiritual to be depressed. First of all, there are many heroes of the Christian faith who have struggled with their mental health. I think of John Bunyan and how he was a Puritan who wrote, what's that famous book? Pilgrim's Progress. He wrote Pilgrim's Progress, but he also wrote about his anxieties. In fact, when I read his little book on his anxieties, I think he had OCD. Then there's Spurgeon, great Baptist preacher in the 1800s, struggled dreadfully with depression. There was a number of factors that contributed it, including an accident that happened in his church where a number of people were killed. He had a natural predisposition, I think, to depression, and he overworked. But he said at one stage, "My spirits were sunken so low, I could weep like a child for an hour and not know what I was weeping for." Or then look at the Psalms. Over 50 of the Psalms are what we would call individual Psalms of lament. And that means it's an individual crying out to God and expressing the depths of sorrow. Jesus used those Psalms himself. Jesus was a man of sorrows and familiar with grief. He wept in Gethsemane and was in anguish. And Spurgeon says about him, "No sin is necessarily connected with sorrow of the heart. For Jesus Christ our Lord once said, 'My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death.'" But what about the fact that we're supposed to have joy in the Lord? Well, I asked a friend of mine who's a New Testament lecturer in a college in Sydney about this, and he pointed me to Psalm 31. Now listen to these verses, verse 7 to 9. "I will be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my heart. Be merciful to me, Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief." Do you notice that he doesn't just talk about depression and anxiety that he used to feel? He's talking about what he's going through at the moment. In other words, he can talk about having joy in God and being depressed at the same time. How can that be? My friend simply said to me, he said, "Look, the idea of joy is not some sort of superficial happiness. Joy is trusting in God, and we can trust in God even in the midst of our sorrow. It may not feel great, but it can be there." One other thing before I finish. What about tablets? What about taking medication? Well, Martin Lloyd-Jones was a great preacher in London in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he wrote in a book, he said, "It's no less spiritual to take medication for the brain than it would be to take insulin for the pancreas." You see, he recognized that there was a medical root to depression. Or I think of John Piper, an American preacher, and he was asked this question. Someone wrote into his program and said, "Hold on a sec, I struggle with depression and take tablets. Is that wrong?" And what he did was he took a glass of water or a bottle of water and he took a swig of it. And then he said, "Was that unspiritual?" And he pointed out, he said, that he had come to the conclusion that there are physical roots behind a lot of depression. And as a result of a physical problem, to take a physical solution like a tablet seems the right thing to do. He said, I could have put my hand to my throat and I could have gone, "Oh Lord, moisten my dry throat." But instead, he took that water. He says it's the same thing. as that water he that water he drank moistened his throat and soothed that physical problem. So tablets can be God's gift to help us in dealing with our depression and anxiety. I hope that you'll be comforted by these thoughts and that you will be willing to talk to your pastor, to friends, even to your doctor if you're in a place where you're very low. This is Take 5, a 5-minute devotion from Evangelical Alliance, and I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.